So I do think Blake is kind of diverse. Like, there might be a lot of rants about like, oh, all these like white kids just walking around. Like, there's too many. I think like based on the amount of kids we have in our grade, like 120, 130, there is a lot of diversity. Not necessarily like maybe certain groups, but there's like a lot of Asians. I know that. So I just think like it's not diverse. It could be more diverse, but I think it's fine.
Yeah, I agree with what Madhav said. I also think there's a wide range of people from different places, so I think that's part of it. Even though like there's still like some issues, I think it's pretty diverse.
Disagreeers can sit down. Just for that is.
Anyone want to start?
I can start. I think like diversity is different from being diverse. Like there's some diversity, right? But when like white people are the large majority, then we can't be a diverse school. Like when we go to like a public school, right? It's like 30% Hispanic, 30% black, 30% white. Like that's diverse, not like a 75% white school. Like there's some diversity, but I wouldn't call this like a diverse school compared to like other schools.
Yeah, I agree with. Is Jay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Jay. I think especially, within the student of color population that we have at our school, you know, the majority I'd say is like Asian American identifying students. So to a certain extent, like the student of color population isn't very diverse because it's all one identity. Not all one identity, but the majority is one identity. And like Jay was saying, it's about like 30% students of color, and within that, if the majority is Asian American, there's a lot of lack of representation for, I know Hispanic identifying students, Black identifying students, Indigenous American identifying students. A lot of those groups that we see more commonly have large populations outside of here in schools around the Twin Cities and metro areas. So just growing up in this environment as a Latino identifying student, it's difficult to be one of, off the top of my brain, I can think about like 4 or 5 Latinos in my grade, and that's just not, for me, an environment that I feel always the most welcomed in, because, yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
I was just like walking around looking for person of color. It took me like 10 minutes. I came across like 5 people of color and like I don't know, maybe 60 white kids. So that right there just isn't diverse at all. I mean, I don't know, that's just one factor of it.
And I will say one more thing, like, Blake is a private school, so it has the power to select who is admitted and, in a way, kind of control the amounts of diversity. And I know, like, they're trying to increase the diversity with the people that are admitted, but right now I just think that there could be even more efforts made towards that, and hopefully that'll be reflected in the classes that are coming up through the elementary school right now and things like that. But growing up in the elementary school and being at Blake for my entire life, like, things haven't necessarily changed in terms of it being a diverse environment. Not to say that it hasn't always been, for the majority of the time, like a welcoming environment for different identities, but in terms of diversity, I feel like there's a huge lack of representation for a lot of different groups of people of color aside from Asian Americans. Yep.
I don't know. I've never been to like public school or anything, so like my only reference really is like private schools that I've been to, and so like I've grown up in a pretty like white environment. So I mean maybe that's why, just compared to like what I'm used to, it's more diverse. But I don't know.
Blake tokenizes people of color.
What does tokenized mean?
Like uses them like advertisement, like, I don't know, that's the main thing I think. kind of uses them as like a promotional thing.
So I would say 1000%, and this is why. Go on the Blake Instagram, and if there's like an event with like the whole school, you're gonna see in the picture in the front almost every time it's some like black kid or like some brown or Asian kid just standing there going like woo, but like it's every time. Like there's literally like maybe 10% of the time there's exceptions. Every time on social media, it's just like a kid of color, nothing else.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely disproportionate. And like, I remember I wasn't here in the high school during this, but I know like one year there's like an assembly where they force all the colored people to go in the front so they could take like a school-wide photo. So like, I know like the staff, I think they got fired or something, but still like knowing that Blake uses or has used in the past like colored people to as a show to like, I don't know, for the social media, like he says, just like that's an example of like tokenization, right? Like using colored people only for like to disproportionately make your school look like it's more diverse than it actually is.
Also, if you go onto the Blake website, it shows you a percentage of races of the people that go there, which kind of feels like a promotionary thing, where it's like, oh, we have a lot of people of color. You should come here.
Yeah, that happened to me when I was like joining like 6th grade. I remember like one of the first things they showed us was like there was like 40% people of color. That's what they showed my parents and stuff.
For me, I think of an example with Blake's Lexicon for Pluralism, which is basically their commitment to celebrating multiculturalism. And there's a flyer that was posted on walls, and I don't know if it's still being used, but I thought it was funny how there was a picture of an Indian kid immigrating named Sai, and then shortly down on the picture, there was another picture of him next to one of my friends who, she's not at the school anymore, her name's Blake, but she's black identifying. So like they literally used him twice, and I don't even know if they realized it. So I always find that a little bit interesting, and that definitely made me think like that Blake tokenizes a little bit, or not even a little bit, a lot bit, it's students of colors, which I do find a little bit unfortunate, because it is good to celebrate diversity, but then again, like people of color aren't a tool for promoting a school. You don't have to conform, bro. It's all good.
What?
Or do you agree now?
No, I thought it was like you like after everyone spoke.
Okay.
I don't know. Like when I think of tokenizing, I think of like stereotyping kind of, and like characterizing. I don't think they really do that. I mean, everything you guys said was true. I don't know. I just didn't like really associate that with like tokenizing, if that makes sense. But
When I think of tokenizing, I think of like singling a group out for the purpose of making yourself look more diverse or look like a better school. It's like when all those examples you guys named, like you're singling like a group of people out just to make it seem or like paint this picture or narrative that the school is something that they aren't, right? And it might be purposely, it may not be, but at the same time, like for colored people at Blake, you get this feeling like, okay, you're just here because you're a token to the school, or like you're here to make the school look better. It's just like you feel singled out in a way. That's why I think of tokenization.
I support affirmative action.
Okay, what's affirmative action?
It's when you give colored people more opportunities, like specifically Hispanic and Black people, to like go to college, because like a history of not allowing them to, or like with a history of less opportunities that push them back, put them in a place currently that would be like lower than what your average white or like other group that's less marginalized would be.
I mean, yeah, I can start. I support affirmative action even though it's no longer in place in the United States because of the fact that I've grown up seeing how there's a lack of opportunity and resources for not necessarily myself. I've been very fortunate to go to Blake and have access to a lot of resources, and especially this year in terms of college counseling, to have the ability to work one-on-one with a college counselor. But outside of school, the majority of my family and the majority of my friends who are people of color in my family, of course, Latino family, Mexican identifying, I see the lack of opportunities that they receive. And I think that it's unfortunate because if schools don't take into account that lack of opportunity, that lack of resource, and really how difficult it is to be at times a person of color in this country, I think that they're missing a large portion of somebody's identity and the reality for that person. And I think specifically for identifying as Latino, I have a lot of family who are first-generation immigrants, for example. And if a school doesn't take that into account, of course they're going to score put worse on a standardized test on the English section than their white counterpart, you know? And I think that in an example like that, not taking it into account is really damaging and also just really unfair overall. So at least for my identity and seeing how it's reflected in my family, I support affirmative action.
Yeah, like I completely agree, right? Like when you grow up in an area where like you're walking around, you see people who you can tell just like don't have the same opportunities as your average white person, then you know like it's hard for them, it's hard to measure opportunity. I mean, it's hard to measure ability when you lack the same opportunity as like, again, like your white counterpart. It's like taking into account something that's you can't measure, right? And like using that to dictate like whether you should get into college or like a measurement to like help understand and give context to why like you would have scored worse on a standardized test is helpful when you're like going through the admission process, because you never know their story and you never know how they got to that point. So like if you want to find like a diamond in the rough, right, like it's better to like understand like everything that helped them get to that point.
Yeah, I like affirmative action because like it's just like for so long people of color, like there's systems like put in place to like keep them down and stuff, and like a lot of those systems are still like kind of in place, and the consequences of those systems are still take effect. So it just feels like leveling the playing field, I guess. Yeah. Like giving people of color like the opportunity they need to succeed.
Excuse me, sit down.
So I agree that there's like been a lot of underrepresentation of people of color a lot in the past. I think that's a problem, but I think like what we should do is like try to solve the root issues for that and like why they're not, a lot of people aren't getting resources. But I think affirmative action, especially like along racial lines, seems like kind of a problem. Just because like I don't really buy into like not giving like a white person who also works super hard, like passing on them just because the other person's like race. There just like seems something, I don't know, just something off with that to me, just selecting based on race. But I also think that it also doesn't consider that there's a lot of white people who are also super poor and also don't have opportunities. So I think just like basic stuff on race alone also kind of has like undertones of like assumption that this person is like from a dire circumstance or this or that. So I think like, yeah, for a lot of people we should just like focus on getting them better resources so they can like succeed and like match people. But I don't think you should just select people based on race.
I think that's a really good answer, because I do agree that like it shouldn't just be based on race, and the root issue is not like, the root issue doesn't start with where you get into college, but it starts much earlier when you're younger. And I do agree like systemic oppression and like it's all been a thing throughout the years, and there's still like people have less opportunity than like others, but like it's still important to notice that like same thing as Max said, like if a white kid's working as hard as you, and suppose like a kid of color is too, and they just get chosen because of that, that's just not right. They both worked hard. And also like I feel like there should be other ways to convey like your context in college apps. And I know there's essays and stuff, but maybe like that can be like further enhanced, and it's not just based on your color, but like the essays are based on your life experiences, which I know exist already. But I think that like you should be able to convey that in those essays or other like writing opportunities than just like writing your race in and being chosen because of that. I think that helps see the context much better, because like if there's a poor white kid, they can write that too, and they're coming from a more unfortunate place. Or so yeah.
White people should not be proud of being white.
You sit down if you agree.
Yeah. Okay, nobody agrees. You can all sit down and explain why.
So like this is where issues begin, I feel like, when you want, what was the prompt? Can you say it one more time?
White people should not be proud of being white.
Yeah, so if you don't want someone to be proud of who they are, I think that's where the problem begins, right? Because like sure, white people have been, in America specifically, in a position of advantage for so long, but that doesn't mean they should be proud. I have so many white friends that are like, they almost feel guilty, and I just don't think that's right for them to feel guilty for the things that their ancestors did in the past, even if they're coming for it. And I think that in a society where we don't want other people, that's like, if I was white and I was telling a black person to be like, oh, you shouldn't be proud because you're black, that's called racism almost. And that's the same thing if we're saying it to white people. So I think like it's a big issue, and everyone should be proud of who they are and what their identity is.
Yeah, I feel like they shouldn't be proud of the bad stuff, but like there's so much more of their culture and stuff they should be proud of. Like I'm proud of my culture. I think they should have that too.
I would say it's not an issue to be proud of your identity as long as you're not being hateful towards others.
I think there's like a difference between being proud and then like overdoing it, like talking about it constantly and like putting it out there and like comparing it to other things, like using it as a way to like make others of like a different race feel a certain way. But like you can still be proud of like who you are.
I mean, yeah, I agree with what you guys are saying. I know there like maybe it might be like some connotations with like the phrase like white pride or whatever, but I just think like being proud of your heritage, being proud of your identity, I don't understand. Like I think it's like kind of a messed up thing to say, oh, you can't celebrate your heritage, you can't celebrate your family just because of like something bad that like they might have done or something in the past. Like obviously you shouldn't celebrate that stuff, but I just think celebrating your heritage, I think it should be like everyone should have it, and I just don't think that, obviously you shouldn't make race your whole identity or whatever, your whole personality, but I think everyone should be able to connect with their roots and their heritage.
Touching on like another point, like regarding what Max said, like yeah, like the whole race thing is like a big issue right now, but like I think it's really important when he said that race shouldn't be your whole identity, and I think that in this society we kind of have to move away or distance ourselves kind of from this whole discussion regarding race, and that I think that's like the ultimate solution to this whole like issue with racism, which doesn't seem realistic, but like it's like we have to embrace people for who they are instead of just seeing like what they are at the face. That's like the biggest issue, in my opinion.
Yeah, especially like the whole like ancestors did bad stuff. I think like every single group has ancestors that did bad things if you like go far enough. So obviously like you can talk about the legacy of racism in America and all that stuff, but I think like attacking individuals just because like what their family did way back when and saying you can't celebrate who you are, I think that's messed up.
I mean, to a certain extent, but if people are celebrating Confederatism,
Well, yeah, I agree. I think you shouldn't celebrate that.
being like a Confederate, and people say, "Oh, that's my history," you know what I mean? So, white people are entitled to celebrate their identity, but there's a fine line between, celebrating your identity and using it to oppress other people and using it to take advantage of your position of power. And I think there's a lot of examples, unfortunately, of white people abusing their position of power to oppress people of color, even in modern society. So that's just my take.